The demand concerns jewelry, specifically a pair of diamond earrings valued between 400,000 and 500,000 pounds. The claim is straightforward and devastating. These earrings remain in the possession of Meghan Markle. They were acquired under circumstances that imply royal endorsement, and they must be returned immediately or the matter will escalate beyond diplomatic channels into formal legal action. But this is not truly about jewelry. This is about something far more consequential: the institutional integrity of the British monarchy itself. Within the hour, the palace machinery activates with practiced efficiency. Senior court officials convene. Constitutional lawyers are consulted. Foreign policy advisors assemble in the Clarence House briefing chamber. By late morning, a response has been drafted, reviewed personally by King Charles, and transmitted through diplomatic back channels with precise timing and calculated restraint. The tone is calm but absolutely unyielding. The British Crown does not accept liability, legal, symbolic, or otherwise, for items never sanctioned, never received, and never documented within royal inventories. No authorization was granted. No asset is held. No protocol was violated. Furthermore, the response insists that all implications of royal complicity be rescinded and that the Saudi household reaffirm mutual respect in future dealings. This is not a rebuttal. This is a fortified boundary drawn with institutional precision. Inside the palace, those privy to the early morning exchange describe King Charles as composed, almost surgical in his handling of the matter. There is no panic, there is no defensive posturing, there is only a careful and deliberate redirecting of institutional responsibility away from the monarchy and toward the individual who accepted the gift. Though Charles's letter is characteristically firm, it does not mention Meghan Markle by name. Instead, it describes her actions as entirely private and non-binding upon the sovereign or the institution. This is about detachment, not denial. This is about establishing unambiguous separation between individual choice and institutional complicity. But if King Charles drew the legal line, Princess Anne delivered the institutional strike. Known throughout the Commonwealth for her razor-sharp discipline and her intolerance for what she terms royal impropriety, Princess Anne convened a high-level internal meeting at Clarence House on January 16th, the day before the diplomatic letter arrived. What she revealed in that meeting would reverberate through the palace for months to come. She confirmed what many had long speculated, but never dared state with official authority. The intelligence dossier exists. The British government compiled it, and the palace attempted to warn Prince Harry before he proceeded further into the relationship. Those 8 words, delivered without flourish, without emotion, with only the characteristic Anne bluntness, sent shockwaves through the assembled advisors and senior officials. She was referencing what had become known internally as the Saudi dossier, a long-suspected British intelligence file compiled between 2015 and 2017. Its contents, now formally acknowledged within royal walls, included documented evidence of Meghan Markle's appearances aboard luxury yachts moored in Mediterranean and Turkish ports, her attendance at exclusive events funded by Gulf-based sovereign wealth entities, a high-spending lifestyle entirely incongruent with the income of a mid-level actress on a television drama series. Most significantly, the dossier contained notations from British counterintelligence analysts suggesting what they termed strategic social placement, a classification applied to individuals believed to be deliberately cultivated and positioned into high-power environments for geopolitical advantage. The most damning revelation involved the very diamonds now at the center of the Saudi demand. The earrings worn by Meghan at a Fijian state banquet in 2018 were not sanctioned by the Crown. They were not gifted by the institution. They represented, according to intelligence briefings, a farewell offering from a Saudi royal, symbolically marking Meghan's exit from one social network and entry into the royal family. Yet no request had been filed with palace protocol. No disclosure had been made to royal advisors. No transparency whatsoever had accompanied the transaction. Princess Anne's internal declaration, backed by MI6 security briefings and the Crown Legal Counsel, made the palace's institutional position unmistakably clear. This was not an administrative omission. This was appropriation of royal symbolism and institutional prestige, and the Crown would not assume guilt for it. While King Charles engaged in diplomatic rebuttal and Anne confirmed the existence of the dossier, Meghan Markle responded in a manner that revealed more through its absence than any statement could have conveyed: complete silence. No media statement emerged from her communications team. No attorney issued a legal response. No social media deflection appeared in her carefully managed cycle of curated messaging. For someone known throughout her post-royal career for swift rebuttals, strategic storytelling, and orchestrated media pivots, this total silence was not merely uncharacteristic, it was calculated. A palace source summarized the situation with grim precision. It's not a delay, it's a withdrawal. When someone known for narrative control suddenly goes silent, they're out of moves. Inside Clarence House, senior advisors interpreted this void not as tactical calm, but as implicit admission. After all, there existed no counter-evidence, no proof of royal authorization, no denial of the Saudi origin of the jewels themselves. Meanwhile, Prince Harry had begun withdrawing from view in a manner that suggested profound psychological crisis rather than strategic retreat. By midday on January 17th, multiple palace insiders confirmed that he had secluded himself within the upper-level library of the Montecito mansion, a room he had once used for reflection during the writing of his memoir. According to discreet staff reports, Harry had not spoken to anyone in over 14 hours. Meals remained untouched. Calls went unanswered. Meghan was observed staying separately in the guest wing, maintaining distance that suggested marital fracture rather than unified response to external pressure. A former royal aide, briefed through inner-circle contacts, described Harry's behavior in clinical terms: emotionally locked down, like a soldier returning from battle only to realize he was fighting on the wrong side. But the psychological rupture was not primarily triggered by the jewelry itself. It was triggered by Princess Anne's 8 words, now playing on continuous loop through every royal archive and press outlet globally. The dossier exists, and we tried to warn him. For the first time, Harry was confronted not by tabloid innuendo or palace gossip or media speculation. He was confronted by official intelligence compiled by British counterintelligence services, filed in 2016, sealed and archived at Windsor Castle, outlining a systematic pattern of strategic placement, financial sponsorship, and behavioral inconsistencies that contradicted everything Meghan had publicly claimed about her life and her background. The file did not reference unnamed sources or vague allegations. It listed yacht manifests from 2011 through 2015, placing Meghan at private Gulf-funded vessels docked in Antibes, Bodrum, and Monaco. It contained flight logs aligning her movements with high-profile elite gatherings. It documented accounts of lifestyle expenditures that far exceeded her reported income during her years as an actress. Most significantly, it included references to a man operating within Gulf networks, a facilitator who allegedly orchestrated key introductions within elite circles, including the fateful meeting that eventually led Meghan to Prince Harry himself. This was not tabloid conspiracy. This had been quietly validated years earlier by MI6, by the Queen's inner circle, and ultimately by Princess Anne herself. That evening, one member of the royal protection team assigned to Charles confided to a colleague words that would later be repeated throughout palace corridors. He's not just furious, he's heartbroken. He believed he had protected her. He believed he had seen her clearly, and instead, he realizes he may have been the only one who was genuinely blinded. In the days that followed, the royal family implemented what analysts would later term a two-tier institutional strategy. King Charles focused his energies on preserving sovereign dignity and rebuffing any suggestion of institutional liability. Every communication, every statement, every diplomatic exchange reinforced a single message. The Crown neither sanctioned nor facilitated any arrangements involving Meghan Markle or the disputed jewelry. Princess Anne, meanwhile, took charge of what might be termed the internal investigation. She confirmed protocol violations. She established new red lines around royal legacy. She met with senior advisors, legal representatives, and constitutional scholars to ensure that every institutional mechanism would be deployed to prevent future infiltration or misuse of royal symbolism. As Anne stood on the steps of a public building the following day to address gathered reporters, her statement was brief but unequivocal in its messaging. The British monarchy will not serve as cover for private arrangements. Honor is not a transferable asset, and the Crown's credibility cannot be borrowed to legitimize individual choices made outside institutional framework. The message had landed with clarity that required no interpretation. The gloves, metaphorically speaking, were off. And for the first time since the Sussex departure nearly 6 years earlier, the Crown was not defending. It was advancing. Back in California, the absence of a single voice had become louder than any official statement could possibly be. That voice was Meghan Markle's. For someone known for swift rebuttals, strategic storytelling, and orchestrated media pivots, her total institutional silence represented not merely a tactical pause, but a recognition that no response existed that would not further damage her position. No press release emerged from Montecito, no legal firm submitted rebuttals to the palace statements, not even a social media deflection appeared in her usual cycle of curated messaging. One palace source noted with grim observation, "When a strategist goes completely quiet, they're out of moves." Inside Clarence House, senior advisors interpreted the void not as tactical calm, but as damage control born of necessity. After all, there existed no counter-evidence to present. There existed no proof of royal authorization to reference. Most damningly, there existed no denial of the Saudi origin of the disputed jewelry itself. What remained was only silence, and silence in such circumstances is often interpreted as admission. By the 19th of January, the silence from Meghan Markle had begun to acquire a different dimension entirely. It was no longer merely the absence of response. It had transformed into something more complex, a strategic vacuum that other forces were rapidly moving to fill. In Hollywood, the temperature around the Sussex brand had shifted with the speed of institutional weather systems changing direction. What had once been managed as a celebrity narrative was now being discussed in industry circles as a credibility crisis of unprecedented proportions. Multiple entertainment executives, speaking anonymously to trade publications, began articulating what had previously existed only as private conversation. The pattern, they suggested, was not coincidental. It was demonstrable. Every significant alliance Meghan had cultivated, from Oprah Winfrey to Serena Williams to Ellen DeGeneres and now Tyler Perry, had eventually fractured or dissolved under circumstances that left the other party appearing sympathetic and Meghan appearing transactional. The list of disenchanted former allies had grown longer than the list of current defenders. And with Tyler Perry's legal team now preparing formal civil filings, the industry consensus shifted from protective silence to analytical distance. One prominent studio executive, granted anonymity by the publication, stated with calculated precision, "Hollywood has a long memory when money disappears and favors are weaponized. We've all been watching this pattern for years. We just weren't willing to speak it aloud until someone of Tyler's stature decided the friendship wasn't worth the cost." The decision to break silence was not isolated to anonymous industry figures. Within days, former Archwell Foundation collaborators began selectively leaking information to entertainment trade publications and investigative journalists. A stylist recounted months of work completed without payment for promised retainers. A producer on an unreleased animated series detailed multiple missed deadlines and erratic feedback patterns that suggested fundamental disorganization rather than creative evolution. Even Netflix insiders, technically bound by confidentiality agreements, hinted through carefully worded comments that Meghan had overpromised and significantly underdelivered on nearly every major pitch following the initial Spotify collaboration failures. The narrative machinery that had once operated in Meghan's favor was now operating with accelerating momentum against her. Back in London, the royal family's counter-narrative was taking subtle but strategically devastating form. Princess Catherine, without ever mentioning Meghan directly, gave a carefully composed interview during a hospital charity visit in the city of Leeds. When asked by a journalist about the power of honesty in public service, Catherine delivered a response that would be quoted extensively across media outlets for weeks to come. "True service doesn't need to be filmed, and gratitude isn't a currency. It's a compass that guides you toward authentic contribution rather than performative gestures." The clip went viral within hours. Millions of viewers interpreted it as a calm but unmistakable rebuke of what they perceived as Meghan's exploitation of her royal past and celebrity access for commercial benefit. More significantly, it underscored Catherine's growing public image as the antithesis of Meghan. Grounded rather than grandiose, graceful rather than combative, consistent rather than shifting. But it was Queen Camilla, previously maintaining careful distance from Meghan-related controversies, who delivered what palace observers termed the most devastating institutional intervention. At a literary awards ceremony held within the grounds of St. James's Palace, Camilla addressed an assembled room of authors, publishers, and cultural figures. The remarks were ostensibly about the power of memoir as a historical document. But a single observation pierced through the diplomatic language with startling clarity. Some memoirs reveal truth, others rewrite it and invoice you twice. The room responded with laughter, but palace insiders immediately recognized the statement for what it truly was. Not a joke, but a carefully calibrated institutional warning. A queen consort, speaking in her official capacity, had just publicly questioned the veracity of Harry's memoir and Meghan's various public narratives about their experiences within and after the royal family. The implications were profound. If the queen consort was willing to make such statements publicly, the gloves were genuinely off. The palace was not merely defending itself, it was advancing a coordinated counter-narrative suggesting systematic dishonesty on the part of the Sussexes. In Montecito, Meghan's communications team scrambled in response to what they clearly recognized as a coordinated institutional offensive. Public relations representatives flooded editors at major publications with clarification memos urging them to correct what they characterized as harmful rumors about Perry, about Oprah, about the palace itself. The tone of these memos suggested desperation rather than confidence. But the media temperature had shifted irrevocably. Editors, previously hesitant to pursue aggressive Meghan coverage due to reputational concerns about appearing racist or misogynistic, now felt emboldened by the palace's explicit positioning. Fact checks became sharper, headlines became colder, commentary became more analytical and less protective. Even daytime television, once generally friendly terrain for Meghan's narrative, became treacherous. On a popular morning talk show, one co-host opened a segment by asking, with barely concealed skepticism, how many billionaires do you have to alienate before it becomes less about them and more about you? In late-night television, a prominent comedian devoted an entire segment to what he termed the Montecito meltdown, comparing Harry and Meghan to two profoundly over-budget film producers who continually blamed the studio while delivering far less than contracted. The audience laughed, but the underlying critique was serious. The couple was being publicly repositioned from sympathetic figures to cautionary tales about ambition exceeding competence. For Prince Harry, the cascading media coverage produced something far more damaging than simple embarrassment. It produced existential crisis. Sources close to the prince described this period as characterized by what they termed quiet panic. His calls to Prince William reportedly went unanswered. His messages to King Charles were returned only by palace aides maintaining formal distance. Even Princess Anne, once a distant but nonetheless reliable institutional presence, was said to have blocked further correspondence from Harry's communications team. At the heart of Harry's psychological deterioration was not merely fear of public shame, it was the growing recognition that Meghan's entire commercial empire was collapsing, and there existed no contingency plan, no backup strategy, no alternative pathway forward. The Montecito mansion, formerly positioned as a symbol of autonomous escape from royal constraints, had transformed into a liability wrapped in multiple legal threats. Tyler Perry's civil action represented merely the most visible of several mounting pressures. There were unpaid bills to contractors. There were disputed invoices from event planners and security consultants. There were questions being raised by tax professionals regarding the appropriate documentation of various financial arrangements. Archwell Foundation, once branded as a transformative media and philanthropic powerhouse, had been systematically reduced to a skeleton staff managing crisis communications. Grant disbursements had been suspended. Partnerships had been quietly terminated. The foundation's public profile, once carefully cultivated, had become radioactive in the eyes of potential donors and collaborative organizations. More immediately damaging was the indefinite postponement of what had been positioned as Meghan's long-planned skincare and wellness brand. Initially scheduled for spring launch with significant financial backing and celebrity endorsements, the initiative had been quietly shelved after multiple corporate partners withdrew their financial commitments and endorsement agreements. Industry sources suggested the withdrawal reflected calculations that association with the Meghan brand now carried reputational risk rather than commercial opportunity. To those observing developments from inside the palace, the unraveling felt grimly familiar. One senior aide compared it to watching a structure constructed from architectural rendering rather than actual materials finally collapse under the weight of reality. Every element that appeared solid upon inspection revealed itself to be hollow. Every promise that seemed credible proved to be unsustainable. Every partnership that seemed permanent revealed itself to be transactional. Unlike previous moments of crisis involving members of the royal family, however, there was no appetite within Buckingham Palace for rescue operations. The institutional strategy had been fundamentally recalibrated around four immovable principles established by King Charles and refined through consultation with Princess Anne and Prince William. No contact, no collaboration, no concession, no correction. Even when rumors surfaced that Meghan's legal team was preparing to leak intimate correspondence, allegedly written by King Charles during Harry's earliest days of self-imposed exile, the palace maintained absolute institutional composure. No statements were issued, no denials were offered, no dramatic responses were crafted. There was only silence, the particular kind of silence that echoes louder than any scandal because it communicates absolute indifference. Princess Anne reportedly articulated the institutional philosophy underlying this approach during a closed-door meeting with senior advisors at Windsor Castle. Let them burn out their own oxygen supply. Our role is simply to not open the door. Silence becomes our shield precisely because they have no capacity to weaponize it. It was the Windsor version of institutional revenge, not characterized by fury or retaliation, but by something far more damaging: finality. The complete withdrawal of all institutional engagement, all emotional consideration, all possibility of restoration. While Hollywood whispered speculation and the global press analyzed developments and Meghan's remaining advisors plotted strategic narrative repositioning, one fact remained immovable and irreversible. Tyler Perry had walked away, and based on all available evidence, no one else was walking in. The financial pressure intensified through late January as Perry's legal team submitted increasingly specific documentation to the Santa Barbara Superior Court. The itemization was comprehensive and devastating. Private jet usage calculated to specific flight hours, private security personnel costs documented with hourly rates, luxury property maintenance expenses detailed to individual invoices, unpaid back rent, professional reputation damages stemming from alleged breach of verbal agreements and public misrepresentation. Attached to the formal legal filing were over 75 pages of corroborating evidence. Text message exchanges between Meghan's representatives and Perry's staff. Detailed expense spreadsheets maintained by financial administrators. Audio transcripts from confidential conversations leaked presumably by individuals with access to both parties' communications. One particular quote dominated the media cycle, repeated across news broadcasts and social media platforms with the velocity of institutional condemnation. "I didn't offer them a palace. I offered them protection. I just didn't know I would need protection from them." Those were Tyler Perry's own words, recorded during what was supposed to be a confidential legal meeting, but subsequently leaked to entertainment trade publications. The statement shattered any remaining illusions that the rift could potentially be mended through private negotiation or behind-the-scenes reconciliation efforts. Montecito residents began observing visible changes in the couple's behavioral patterns and household operations. Meghan was no longer visible conducting school runs or making appearances at local cafes where paparazzi had previously positioned themselves. The gated mansion remained eerily quiet, suggesting dramatically reduced household activity. Deliveries became noticeably less frequent. Security personnel visible outside the property diminished in numbers in ways that suggested staffing reductions rather than strategic repositioning. Multiple neighbors granted anonymity by entertainment journalists reported not observing Prince Harry in visible form for more than 2 weeks. One neighbor provided particularly damaging testimony to Page 6, suggesting that the security detail outside the property had visibly thinned and that household operations appeared to be contracting rather than maintaining previous levels of activity. Rumors swirled through California celebrity circles that household staff had been quietly laid off without formal severance processes or standard notice periods. Archwell's Beverly Hills office was reported to be half empty, with several senior public relations executives suddenly announcing new professional positions with competing organizations or independent consulting practices. A former Archwell intern, granted anonymity, provided a particularly insightful characterization of the organization's operational reality to a journalist. It always felt like a castle made of fog, beautiful titles, significant promises, but no actual structural foundation underneath. Every time pressure was applied, things just collapsed into nothing. In the end, there was no dramatic confrontation, no public reckoning, no moment of truth delivered on a palace balcony or through a carefully managed statement. There was only the quiet collapse of an empire constructed from narrative rather than substance. Montecito became not a symbol of escape, but a monument to consequence. Tyler Perry's absence spoke louder than any lawsuit. The palace's silence communicated more than any defense ever could. Prince Harry, once the boy who believed he was saving a princess, discovered he had been merely a transaction in someone else's calculated strategy. And the woman he defended with such ferocity was never in need of defense. She was an instrument, strategic, positioned, handled. The crown moved forward as it always does, not with triumph but with the quiet work of institutional repair and the cold understanding that some doors, once closed, are never opened again.